Okay, here's a video explaining what to do here on problems 2 from the individual assessment on chapter 5 and what to do on problem 6 on the individual assessment from chapter 5. In this problem number 2, we are going to be using in A and B, we're going to be using trigonometry. In C and D, we're going to be using inverse trigonometry. The difference here and why I know that's going to be trig and inverse trig with regular trigonometry, you are going to be solving for the missing side length of a right triangle using the angle and the other side length. And you see in B as well, we're going to be looking for a side length using our angle and our other side length. That leads to me to believe I'm going to be using trigonometry. Our three trigonomic functions we learned in chapter 5 were sine, cosine, and tangent. And the big thing to remember is SOHCAHTOA, because that tells me when to use which one. Okay? If I see a triangle that has the opposite side and the hypotenuse, I need to use sine. If I see a triangle that has the adjacent side and the hypotenuse, I need to use cosine. If I see a triangle that has the opposite side and the adjacent side, I need to use tangent. And the way it works is you'll take the sine, for example, of your angle, and I'm just going to use this as my angle sign. You take the sine of your angle and you set it equal to the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. And eventually, if you put the sine over 1, you can cross multiply and solve if you plug things in correctly. Same thing with cosine. If you take the cosine of your angle, you can set it equal to, and the angle is always the angle they give you, you can set it equal to the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. Lastly, for tangent, if you use tangent of your angle, you can set it equal to the opposite over the adjacent. And again, it goes with SOHCAHTOA. Oops, I didn't mean to make this go away. See, sine opposite divided by adjacent. SOH. Sine equals opposite divided by hypotenuse. Cosine equals adjacent divided by hypotenuse. Tangent equals opposite divided by adjacent. Now, when you look at a triangle like 2A, you say, okay, this is my angle 40, this is my 90. If it's between my angle and my 90, that is my adjacent side. The 28 is across from my 90-degree angle. That tells me that that is the hypotenuse. I see that I have adjacent hypotenuse. I'm using cosine. So I'm using the cosine of my angle, which is 40, set it equal to the adjacent side x divided by the hypotenuse 28, and I solve for x. It's a little bit different in B. You have your angle being 35. X is across from your 35, so that is opposite. And 50 is your hypotenuse. So opposite hypotenuse tells you you should use a certain trig function. For C, we have our inverse trigonometry. Inverse trigonometry is sine inverse, cosine inverse, and tangent inverse. Again, I know it's inverse trigonometry because now we're looking for an angle in a right triangle. Anytime we're looking for an angle in a right triangle, we're going to use inverse trigonometry. Okay? The way it works is still similar to how SOHCAHTOA works. SOHCAHTOA. If you have the opposite side and the hypotenuse, you're going to use sine inverse. If you have the adjacent side and the hypotenuse, you're going to use cosine inverse. If you have the opposite side and the adjacent side, you're going to use tangent inverse. For the sine, how it works, it's a little bit different. Sine inverse, what you do is in the parentheses, you have the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. You plug that into your calculator, and you'll get out the angle, which is going to be your answer. For cosine, you plug in the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse, and whatever you get in your calculator is going to be your angle. Lastly, for tangent, you plug in the opposite side divided by the adjacent side, and whatever you get out is going to be your angle. So again, you need to evaluate the triangles. What are they giving me? Well, in triangle C, they're giving me the adjacent. This 14 is my adjacent. It's between my angle and my 90. 22 is my hypotenuse because it's across from the 90-degree angle. Well, adjacent hypotenuse, looking for an angle, that tells me cosine inverse. I can do the cosine inverse, plugging in adjacent divided by hypotenuse, and I can get my missing angle. A little bit different for D, but the same kind of thing exists. X across from X is 16. That means that's the opposite side. 30 is the hypotenuse. It tells you which one to use, opposite hypotenuse. Taking a look down here at 6. Okay, let's use some lines to draw it out. It says that Caleb starts at one end of a lake, so we have a lake here. He walks 95 meters from one end of the lake, so he walks 95 meters. He then turns at a 60-degree angle and he walks 87 more meters until he hits the other side of the lake. We're looking for the distance across the lake, which is here. Well, let's label our sides. He first walked 95 meters, so this side is 95. He turned at a 60-degree angle. He then walked 87 more meters. And we're looking for our missing side over here over the lake. Well, this is a non-right triangle because nowhere in here does it say it's a right triangle and nowhere in here does it say there's a 90-degree angle. So when it's a non-right triangle, it's either going to be law of sines or law of cosines. Well, since we have one angle between two side lengths we know, it's going to be the law of cosines. And the law of cosines is as follows: c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2 times a times b times the cosine of angle C. Well, in a law of cosines problem, your angle C is the one angle they're going to give you. So in this case, it's 60. Your little c right here is always the side length across from your angle. So here is my little c. And a and b you get to choose, but it's going to be the side lengths that you know. So in this problem, I would say 95 is a, 87 is b, and I would plug in each part and go on and solve. The thing to remember about when you go on to solve is your order of operations, Pemdas. That's how I learned it, and that's how I've talked about it before. That means you do the parentheses first. Well, there are no parentheses in the law of cosines. So that means you do exponents first. So calculate all your exponents. Then you do your multiplication and division next. And then you save addition and or subtraction for the last thing you do. Okay? If you follow the order of operations, plug things correctly into the order of operations, you should get an answer of, I believe, C equals 91.26. So hopefully when you do this problem, that's the answer you get. Otherwise, you may have screwed up either plugging things in or following your order of operations. So try it again until you get that answer of 91.26. Hopefully it's helpful. I don't want to give away too much. I want you to make the corrections on your test, not me make the corrections on your test. So again, if you have more questions as you work, let me know.